Okay, I'm going to try and tackle a pretty sticky topic in this video. What I'm going to say will be controversial and opinionated, but I want to start from the outset that what I'm trying to say is not to degrade women, but to help them. The idea of feminism's become a big part of my life because I work with so many men who seem to be negatively affected by it. And what I mean by that is that the role that feminism has played in especially in Western culture for the last 30 or 40 years, 50 years, geez, how old am I? Long time, has left us with a generation of weak men. That's simply put, men who are scared to be men, and because of that, they're not really anything, they're just passive. And so a lot of my work is on sort of helping these men rediscover masculinity and so on. But I don't want the woman to be left behind. While I do not believe any further that, at least in the Western world, women are behind men, as was commonly been the case, I do believe they're still disadvantaged. But today I'm going to be talking about why I believe that women are getting in their own way and that it's not men's fault. I want to start by addressing or pointing out three facts that are true. Okay, three things that are true that are the grounds for what I'm about to say. Fact number one, throughout human history, every single culture has been patriarchal. Okay, if you go back for 20,000 years, if you go right back to the beginning of Homo sapiens and you track every culture, even if they were separate from each other for thousands of years, it was almost inevitable that there would be a patriarchy. Even when a woman was at the top, like Cleopatra or Queen Elizabeth I, all the other top people were still men, and men dominated the scene. And that's always been the feminist argument, that there is a patriarchy holding women back. And I don't disagree with that. There has always been patriarchy, and now it's global. There are some countries where it's horrific, like Yemen or Saudi Arabia, where women are still seen as chattels and property and treated awfully. And there's other countries that are so progressive that it's hard to argue that there is a patriarchy anymore, like Canada and the UK, where women are actually getting, in often cases, better treatment than men, and they're statistically doing better than men for quality of life. But patriarchy, yes, there's always been patriarchy throughout human history. It's almost like we're biologically wired to have this kind of sexism in place. So that's a fact. I'm going to be getting into that. That's fact number one. Fact number two is that there's no reason for this biologically. Simply put, it is factually accurate to say that a woman can do anything a man can do. Alright? There are women who are strong enough to mine coal and play sports and be police officers and serve in the Marines. And there are women who are smart enough to be CEOs and world leaders. And there are women who can do anything that a man can do. There is nothing biologically true about a woman that makes her less capable than a man. There's nothing psychological about a woman. All these sort of stereotypes and sort of somewhat biological facts about women being, say, more agreeable or more emotionally temperamental still doesn't prevent them from doing any of the top roles. They're still completely capable of that. And even if those traits were to make them incapable of that, there are plenty of women who don't have those traits. There are disagreeable women. There are emotionally stable women. There is nothing biological about a woman that says she can't do what a man can do. That's fact number two, which means fact number one is a mystery. Why are we patriarchal when women could do everything? Okay. This was before religion, by the way. Before we had Catholicism, Christianity, whatever, Islam, before we had like systems of religion that actively oppressed women, women were still oppressed, or so it may seem. And the third one is the common argument for feminism is that the reason there's a patriarchy is because masculinity is toxic and aggressive. But even if that's true, that does not explain dominance. You look at any culture across the world, any leader who got to his position through aggression and violence did not last. When somebody overtakes a government with a violent coup, the most likely outcome is that they themselves will be overtaken by a violent coup. The men who dominate the business world, the political world, don't get there by violence. They get there by something else, social relationships, which is what I'll be talking about today. So the idea that masculinity is oppressing women is inaccurate because all the leaders did not get there through aggressiveness. Okay, the ones who do don't last. It's as simple as that. The ones who do, they don't get voted in a second time. They don't even get voted in a first time. A CEO doesn't get to the top by smashing all the employees or threatening to kill them. He gets there by charming them. So, those are the three facts that I'm basing what I'm about to say on. One, all cultures have been patriarchal. That's heavily documented. Read the book Sapiens by Yuval Harari if you want to know the evidence for that. Men have always dominated culture as a patriarchy. Two, there's no biological reason for this. There's nothing a man can do that a woman can't do. There's no reason why a woman can't lead a country or run a business or shoot a gun at an enemy. She can do all of the things a man can do. And number three, the idea that men are more aggressive and that's why they dominate does not make sense. That is not how people dominate. Even other animals don't dominate that way. Okay? They dominate by social relationships, especially other primates. Chimpanzees, it's not the strongest chimpanzee who runs the troop, it's the one with the most friends. Okay? So what's the implication of these three facts for women, and particularly feminist women? I want to talk about a story. My first girlfriend, she had these three friends. They were like Sex and the City, this group of four friends. And about once every 3 months, I'd come home and she'd be in tears. And the same thing was the case every time. The reason she was crying is because it was her turn to be excluded from the group. The group had this weird habit of just turning on each other at random times. A lot of the time they'd be harmonious, and then one day 3 of them would just hate on one of them for a brief period of time. Or sometimes it would be 2 versus 2. But they had these weird fallouts that would be healed after a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and they'd all get back together as a foursome. But there would be a temporary state of harmony, and then they would break up again. And I saw this repeat with almost every girlfriend I've ever had. In fact, the only ones I didn't see it repeat with were the ones I weren't long enough to meet their group of friends. But every girl I knew, she had this clique of friends, and that clique was very tight. They would even call themselves something like the 4 or the 6. You know, they'd have this very set number of friends that they were the close in the circle, and inevitably there would be fallouts within that group. They'd do nasty things to each other, then they'd get back together, and then they'd do nasty things to another one. Sometimes there was a leader who never got kicked out, but she directed the behaviour of the others. This is kind of normal for girls. I know a lot of, in my experience, this is anecdotal evidence. I'll go into more valid evidence later. But I saw this all the time, and I just thought it was really bizarre because my friends didn't do that. My friends, if you were in our group, even if I couldn't stand you, the fact that you're in my team means I'll be there for you. And there was no falling out. There was very rare for a guy to get kicked out of the group, and if he did, it was permanent. We never saw him again. But most of the time, I know guys who have been friends with each other since primary school, and 40 years later, they're still the same tight group of mates, and they've never had a big fallout. And that's a pretty common experience if you go around talking to guys who are relatively socially capable. Their group of friends generally is quite harmonious and clicks well together. Now, the reason I bring this up is because that came up for me when I started reviewing the 3 facts I mentioned before, which is, especially number 3, a patriarchy is a group of men who get along well together, aren't they? A patriarchy isn't a single guy running everything. It's him and all his boys running everything. That's a patriarchy. So why isn't there ever a matriarchy? And I think my experiences early on, watching groups of girls be friends and watching groups of guys be friends, gave me some hints as to why this is happening. Now, there's a study that's come out recently, so this is where we get into more valid evidence. I'm going to include a link below in the video so that you can find the study for yourself. And I'll just read briefly from it. Assistant Professor Sun Young Lee of the UCL School of Management, the lead author, said the findings suggest that standard career structures in which people are constantly encouraged to compete for promotion put women at a disadvantage. Now, what this article is about is it's discovered that the biggest barrier to a woman succeeding in business is not men, but other women. They hold each other back, and the way they compete prevents all of them moving up. And I believe that this study is very telling. I don't know exactly how valid and reliable it is, but it's helped me to develop a bit of a hypothesis. And this is where we're getting opinionated. I think the real reason for patriarchy is not that men dominate exactly. It's not that men are trying to subjugate women. It's that women are not working together well enough to fight against any oppression. And this is why I think feminism doesn't work. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Men work well together as a group. They're awful against their enemies. So if you get a group of men versus another group of men, the conflict will be terrible. So my group of friends were really tight with each other, but if we went to a party where a group of friends from a different school was there, there'd almost certainly be violence. Okay? So that was the kind of extreme. My group never fought against each other. I remember one time a friend of mine slept with another friend's girlfriend, and they were mates again within 2 months. The group harmony was so strong that even that couldn't pull them apart, because it was too disharmonious to our guy group. Whereas the girls I know, one would call another girl a bitch and they wouldn't speak for years. Such extreme punishment. The disharmony was stronger than the harmony. But the disharmony between groups of males is often very violent. Look at World War II. That's essentially multiple patriarchies fighting against each other. But if you look at, say, you've got Allies versus Germany or whatever, Axis. Germans got on very well with each other and supported each other. And Allies, Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin got along in order to win the war, and they had very different values. So the two patriarchies, the Allies worked very well together, the Germans worked very well together, but when they came to a head, it was horrific violence. Okay? Now, what I believe is that men work very well together with guys from their own tribe. I've got this kind of mental experiment. If you put a group of guys onto a task, they've never met each other before, and you put them together on a task, and then you get a group of women, and they've never met each other before, and you put them together on the same task. I believe, personally, that most of the times the women will actually probably do better with that first task because they'll be more harmonious. When they initially meet and they're strangers, they'll work together better as a team, whereas the guys will be off competing for leadership, and there'll always be that one dick who slows everything down, and so on. So when there's a myth that women are better at socializing than men, that women are more harmonious with socializing than men, and that's because if you put them with strangers, they get along with strangers better than men who tend to get quite competitive. But what isn't usually shown is what would happen if you make that group of guys stay together for a year as a team, and you make that group of girls stay together for a year as a team, and then you repeat the task over and over again for a year. I put it to you that what would happen, most likely in an average group, the men would eventually form a deep harmony. A clear leader would emerge. It would be like a wolf pack. Everybody would take on their roles, and they'd do everything to make sure the group did well. It would become like the sole focus, and they would compete violently with the girls' group. They'd do everything to beat the girls' group. Whereas a year later, the girls' group, who did so well initially, would be, I believe, more likely to have turned on themselves. There would be cliques, there would be gossip, there would be backstabbing. Now, this is totally opinion, but the study that I'm talking about shows some hints towards this. Because I believe the reason that there's a patriarchy is because there is not a competitive matriarchy. There isn't a group of women who gets along well enough to compete with the group of guys who get along very well. I don't believe women are being oppressed by men. I simply believe that they cannot come together cohesively enough to be of real competition to a group of men. You see, when a guy becomes CEO, he's not really an individual. He's part of a network. When he walks into the CEO interview panel, he's already charmed all of them, and he's already got good referrals from all the other guys in the company. He basically walks onto the job. Whereas the woman who walks into the same interview, not only is she on her own, but she's not even supported by the other women in the company. She's competing against the man and she's competing against all the women. Whereas that man isn't really competing against anyone. He's already won the votes before he goes in general. Men will go to war with their enemies, but they'll die for a friend. In fact, they'll die for someone who's just an associate of the same tribe. You think about the Marines, right? The Marines, the constant theme within the Marines is you die for the guy next to you. It's the guy next to you that matters. And they get like that. Like, I've met a few Marines in my life, and their friend circles are like, the only friends I care about are the ones who will die for me. You know, now they'll go and they'll kill every Iraqi they meet. They don't give a fuck, that's the enemy. It can be very violent to the out-group. But to the in-group can do no wrong. They could witness one of their colleagues committing a war crime and they'll cover it up for him. That's how strong the in-group mentality is. So, male CEOs, they don't beat their way to the top. A male CEO doesn't get to the top of the company by threatening people and by violence. That doesn't make sense. Nobody's ever done it that way, right? Or they have, but they can't get away with it for very long. They charm their way to the top. They build communities of support to get to the top. It's political. They get the votes, right? Women are very good at making peace with enemies. They can easily connect quickly with a stranger or a competitor at first. But they're more likely to sabotage and betray their friends. I really genuinely believe this. Now, I know I'm heavily biased by my own anecdotal experience because I saw this a lot as I was growing up. My friends would die for each other, super loyal. You know, there's bros before hoes type stuff that we grew up with. You know, I know how that sounds, but that's how it was. Whereas the woman, I'd just be watching them going, God, how could you do that to your own friend? Time and time again with different circles of friends. I'm a floater, which means I'm part of lots of different circles. I have a group of friends that are a certain culture from West Auckland, kind of tough guys who are in the trades and they're into cars and partying and fishing and stuff. There's that kind of group. I'm part of a group that's a dance kind of group, you know, and they're into salsa dancing, stuff like that. Completely different sort of psychology and group of people. And I'm into a group of people who are entrepreneurs. All the circles of guy friends, while they're completely different types of guys, follow the same principles when they're in groups. They stick together. The loyalty of the group is everything. They are a gang. They die for each other. I'm also parts of circles that include groups of women. And what I see time and time again, the reason I'm so biased around this, is that the women are far more likely to betray and sabotage each other, to hold each other back and to cut each other down. It's certain, and it seems like this very random, irrational thing that they do. Now, if we look at other animals, if we look at, say, elephants, which are a matriarchal society, what we see is the same process that we see in human men, which is matriarchal animals build a society of support network. The queen of the elephants has all her duchesses, and they've got her back, and all the guys are individually competing with each other. And that's why there's a matriarchy. It's because the girls have the support in numbers. And girls don't need to be stronger than guys physically or even more aggressive. They just need to be more socially cohesive. It's the same in certain types of primates. There are a few primate species that are matriarchal, and the same thing applies. The guys are competing with each other while the girls are getting along and supporting each other. This brings me to feminism. I believe feminism looks like women getting together, but is anything but. It is not women getting together. It is women turning on each other. Now, when you first look at feminism, especially current day feminism, it appears that women have got together to hate on men. That's how it appears. But when you really look at feminism, who are they targeting? It's not men. It's housewives. The biggest enemy to a true feminist is not a man. It's not the CEO of the company or the President of the United States. It's their wives. It's the one who chooses to stay home and raise the kids. That's the feminist's greatest enemy. That's the one they hate the most, the one they hate even more than men. And you can see this anywhere. You look it up, you look at the way feminists treat women who choose to behave in that oppressed way, who are given the freedom to be whatever, and they choose not to engage in that freedom. Nothing a feminist hates more than that. But the thing is, it's so indirect. They don't say, we hate housewives. What they say is like, women are held back, by the patriarchy, that men are too aggressive and violent and dominant and women don't have a chance. I want you to read between the lines of that message. They're saying women are weak. They're saying women are pathetic. They're saying women won't take control. They're saying women are victims. They're talking about the man, but the implications they're making about the woman are far more degrading than what they're saying about the man. Aren't they? When a feminist says that men are holding us back, what they're really saying is all other women are too weak. Which isn't true. Fact number 2, there's no biological reason why women can't do what men do. And yet feminists are kind of saying this. They're saying the only reason women don't dominate is because men get in the way. They're implying that men are too strong for women to deal with, that men need to step back. That is an attack on women, not an attack on men. That is calling women weak victims, too passive, too nice to deal with the dominance of men. There is nothing that upsets the true feminist more than the family unit. The man who's the breadwinner, the woman who stays at home and takes care of the kids. There's nothing more upsetting to a feminist. She'll talk about the man, but she's really talking about the housewife. And this is what I'm getting to here. I truly believe that patriarchy is not a result of men being too dominant. It's a result of men not having any real competition from women. Not that women couldn't compete, it's that they can't compete in numbers. See, men aren't getting to the top because the individuals are smarter or stronger in any way than women. There's no biological fact behind that statement. Men are the same as women in terms of capability for these particular things. Dominance in the STEM concepts, leadership in business, politics. There's nothing about those activities that say women are inherently weaker. Women tend to be more agreeable biologically in terms of personality, but that doesn't actually stop you from doing well. There are plenty of agreeable presidents, So, I believe the real issue that feminism masks is that feminism itself shows the problem that women have is that women do not work well together in the same way that men do. That a patriarchy is not based on aggression but on social cohesion. The old boys club, the Freemasons, these very masculine, male-oriented networks, they're the reason for the success of the individuals. It's not the individual's merit, but the support he has. The undenying support. Guys will get their friends jobs even if the friend sucks at the job. Right? He'll even get his female friends jobs. But females getting their female friends jobs is less likely to happen. I truly believe that. And the study that I'm referring to clearly indicates that might be the case. Suggests some strong evidence for it. So I wanted to put this video out there because, well, partly I'm just sick of men being blamed, but also I'm sick of women being told that they're victims by feminists. You're not victims at all. You're as capable as men. There is no excuse for being oppressed. The only reason a large group of people can be oppressed by a small group of people is if the large group of people do not work together. That's simple fact. The reason that a tyrannical government can take over a population of millions of people who outnumber their army and everything is because the millions of people can't come together as a unit. And yet what you see historically is when they finally do, the government is toppled like that. Everything is there for women to do as well as men in all areas of life. They've got the capability, there's nothing biologically that makes them weaker. There's really nothing about men that prevents them from competing. There used to be with laws and stuff, but even then, you can see when the initial feminist movement happened, women got together, at least for a brief period of time, and it worked. Laws were changed, women got the vote, everything was changed, and then they fell apart again. They couldn't hold that cohesion. There's now several different strains of feminism, and they fight with each other just as much as they fight against men. And they fight against other women just as they fight against men. One of the biggest rifts at this moment is not feminists versus men, but feminists versus female non-feminists. That's one of the biggest battles happening at this moment. Men don't even need to get involved. Men can just watch all this and go, alright, well, while you guys are doing that, I'm going to go be CEO. My mate's got a job for me. So, that's what I believe to be true. I can't wait to hear your feedback. My email address is dan@brojo.co.nz. I encourage you not to hold back in what you have to say. I also encourage you to read the study that I'm referring to, the sisterhood ceiling. And I want you to just consider, once again, those three facts. All cultures have been patriarchal. There's no biological reason for this. And masculine aggression does not explain social dominance. When all those things are true, and they are, they've been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to be true, then the only real explanation left for why there is a patriarchy and not a matriarchy is about social cohesion for the sexes. Males cohesively work together with their own tribe better than females do. And that can be changed. The final point I want to make here, because it may sound like I'm saying that somehow men are better than women, I'm really emphasizing that's not the case. See, men go to war with their enemies, and that's where we can learn from women. Okay? Because women are totally competitive. They just compete against the wrong people. They compete against their peers instead of their enemies. And men are very competitive too, but they compete against their enemies in such a destructive way that they can't make friends with them later. Men can learn from women, and women can learn from men here. Men can learn how to have conflict without war. That's what women can teach us. They can teach us how to meet with your enemy and find compromise and solutions without it going to bloodshed. But women can learn from men too, about how to support each other, about how to create a network of loyalty that isn't riven by drama. The girls that I'm referring to from my own past, quite often what I'd see is one of them would get abandoned or betrayed by the group of girlfriends one too many times, and they'd go, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to be friends with guys. And they would, for the rest of their lives, they'd have guy friends instead of girlfriends. And invariably, I must have asked 24 girls at least who have been through this why they did it, and they said, with guys there's less drama. That was the same sentence that came out of their mouth every single time. When a girl has friends with a group of guys, when she's part of the boys, less drama. That's what she says every time. And guys are just like, why would we want drama? Of course not. Like that other dude, Ross, in our group, I don't really like him, but he's in our group, so I'll give him a lift to the airport. He's part of the crew. That's how guys think when they're in a group. Whereas a girl will be next to her best friend and think, this bitch is getting a bit too ahead of herself. Someone needs to bring her down. I'm not saying all girls are like this, of course. There's some sweeping generalizations I'm making, but facts are facts. If there's a patriarchy, then you have to ask, why isn't there a matriarchy? And nothing that feminists say about male oppression explains it. There is no reason why men should be at the top, biologically, psychologically, not even culturally. There are plenty of cultures these days where women have equal rights to men, and yet they're still male-dominated. It's because women aren't working together like the men are. You can't have an individual compete against a network that's built over dozens of years. You never have a chance. One soldier will never take out an army, even if the army is full of inferior soldiers. So, that's my lesson to both men and women. Men, understand that you can help your women to build networks or even join your network. If their girlfriends won't help them, hook them up with the boys. Get them some support. I love getting my female friends support. It's so amazing how many of my female friends come to me and they've got no one. I'm like, really? No one? Every guy I know has got like at least 3 mates who will help him with his career and shit. You've got no one? That's crazy. Come and join my group. We'll sort you out. Join the Marines, you know? So those are my thoughts. I welcome your agreements, but I'm more likely to get your abuse. I can't wait to hear it. And hopefully that's been insightful for some of you. Cheers.